All right, let's jump right in. Today we're tackling MCDP-2, intelligence. It's the Marine Corps' go-to doctrine for, well, winning the intelligence war. You know how it goes. Intelligence. Isn't that just for the intel guys? But here's where MCDP-2 throws a wrench in things.
Definitely MCDP-2 really drives home that point. Every Marine, no matter what their MOS is, no matter their rank, they're a vital part of the whole intelligence process. It's about creating this culture where every Marine, they see themselves as a sensor, always gathering and evaluating information.
Kind of like every Marine a rifleman, but for intelligence, right?
You got it. Emphasizing that even little things you notice, things that might seem small, they could be key to the whole intelligence puzzle.
So it's not just, having those dedicated intelligence units. It's about making that intelligence mindset, like part of the DNA of the Marine Corps.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful concept. And
Yeah.
while MCDP-2, it pushes gathering information, it's also crystal clear about one thing, the difference between raw information and what we call processed intelligence. It's not just about collecting data. It's got to be analyzed, understood, and turned into knowledge we can actually use.
So let's break that down a bit. MCDP-2, it actually defines intelligence as knowledge. It's not just like data points. It's about getting the enemy, the environment, and how those things shape the battle space.
That's the heart of it. Think of it like this. Every piece of information, it's a piece of a puzzle. By itself, doesn't tell you much. But put those pieces together, you analyze the patterns, you connect the dots, that's when you get the clear picture. That's intelligence.
And that intelligence is what leads to good decisions, right?
Yeah.
Decisions that lead to mission success.
Right on target. MCDP-2 lays out two main goals for intelligence: supporting commanders by getting rid of as much uncertainty as possible, and protecting our own forces through what we call counterintelligence.
So on one hand, we're trying to light up the battlefield, trying to understand what the enemy wants to do, what they can do, as clearly as we can. And on the other hand, we're working to keep our own plans, our own movements hidden from the enemy so they don't understand.
Exactly. A two-pronged approach. You're gaining knowledge to guide what we do, while also stopping the enemy from doing the same thing. And this all comes back to the ODO loop, something MCDP-2 really highlights as tied to intelligence.
The OD loop: observe, orient, decide, act. It's like one of the foundations of Marine Corps doctrine. So how does MCDP-2 specifically connect intelligence to the OD loop, this crucial decision-making framework,
It stresses that intelligence, it's vital in those first two phases, observe and orient. It directly impacts the commander's ability to make those split-second decisions, the really effective ones. It's like giving the commander, high-powered binoculars. They can see the battlefield more clearly, make sense of all the chaos.
So intelligence is not just some abstract idea. It's a tool that directly affects our ability to outmaneuver the enemy. Outthink them.
You got it. But MCDP-2 also acknowledges something. Intelligence is never perfect. We're always working with information that's incomplete. We've got enemy deception, and the fog of war, well, it's always there.
Yeah, that fog of war can be a real pain. How does MCDP-2 deal with that? That uncertainty that's just built into the whole intelligence process.
It emphasizes that we've got to factor in the enemy's will. They're going to try to deceive us. Got to remember, they're not just static points on a map. They think, they adapt, they're going to actively try to mess with our intelligence efforts.
So we want perfect intelligence, sure, but we've got to be ready to work in a world where things are unclear. We've got to make decisions based on what we've got, even if it's not everything.
Exactly. And that's where the human element is so important. Technology, it gives us incredible tools, but at the end of the day, it's the Marines, their judgment, their experience, their gut feeling. That's what turns data into intelligence we can use.
Makes sense. MCDP-2 also digs into how the information age affects intelligence. We've got more data than ever before, which comes with its own set of problems, right?
The information revolution, it's a game changer for intelligence. Satellites, databases, almost instant communication. They've all changed how we gather, process, and share information. But MCDP-2 gives us a warning. Don't get lost in the flood of data.
Like drinking from a fire hose, as they say. You get a ton of information, but can you even process it? Can you pick out what's actually important?
Exactly. MCDP-2 highlights how important it is to filter, analyze, and really understand that flood of information. We got to avoid getting stuck in analysis paralysis, where you're drowning in data and you lose sight of the big picture.
So technology is a powerful tool, but it can't replace humans analyzing and using their judgment.
Right, and that leads us to a key framework that MCDP-2 lays out for understanding the whole intelligence process. We call it the intelligence cycle.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. MCDP-2 breaks down the intelligence process into phases, all linked together. Can you walk us through those?
Absolutely. The intelligence cycle, it's got 6 phases: planning and direction, collection, processing and exploitation, production, dissemination, and utilization. Each phase is critical. They all work together to make sure we're getting intelligence that's timely, relevant, and actionable.
Sounds like a well-oiled machine. Every part's got to work right for the whole thing to function.
Great analogy. It starts with planning and direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the commanders, they figure out what intelligence they need. What do they need to know to make the right calls? That drives the whole process.
So it all starts with the commander figuring out what they don't know. What are those unknowns that could really affect the mission?
Exactly. Then comes collection. We gather information from all kinds of sources. Human intelligence, signals intelligence, open source information, you name it. It's like casting a big net to catch all those puzzle pieces.
And then processing and exploitation, right? That's where we make that raw data usable.
Yep. Translating languages, decoding messages, analyzing images. Basically, we're turning that raw data into something our analysts can use to build that intelligence picture.
So refining the raw materials, making them more valuable.
Precisely. Then we hit production. That's where we analyze the processed information. We turn it into actual intelligence. Analysts connect the dots, figure out how reliable the information is, and draw conclusions about the enemy's capabilities and what they intend to do.
So we've gone from raw data to refined information, and now, finally, to intelligence we can use. So what's next?
We get that intelligence to the people who need it in a format they can use, and fast. This is where speed matters. The best intelligence in the world, if it's late, it's useless.
Like they say, justice delayed is justice denied. But here, it's intelligence delayed is opportunity lost.
You got it. And lastly, we have utilization. That's where the commander and their staff, they take that intelligence and use it. They use it to make decisions, plan operations, and achieve their objectives. This closes the loop, and often it feeds right back into planning and direction, creating new intelligence needs.
A continuous cycle, always changing, based on the situation, the enemy, and what the commander needs.
Right. And MCDP 2, it stresses that good intelligence, it's got some key traits. It needs to be timely, relevant, accurate, and it's got to be presented in a way commanders can easily understand and use.
Timeliness and relevance, those seem crucial in a fast-paced, always changing environment.
Absolutely. If intelligence is outdated or doesn't address what the commander needs, it's useless. MCDP 2 also highlights something else. We need to understand how the enemy makes decisions and use intelligence to mess with their plans.
We often think of tempo being driven by, maneuver and firepower. But intelligence, it plays a huge role too. It's about using information to grab the initiative and set the pace of operations.
Yeah, yes. MCDP 2 gives some great examples of how intelligence can be used to drive tempo, disrupt enemy operations, and achieve decisive results. It even uses the 1972 North Vietnamese offensive as a case study to show how good intelligence, even when it's initially challenged, can be crucial to repelling attacks.
So it's not just about reacting to the enemy. It's about predicting their moves, using intelligence to set the pace.
Right. And that brings us back to a key theme that runs throughout MCDP 2. Every Marine is an intelligence asset. No matter your MLS, your observations and insights, they can contribute to the overall intelligence picture.
That's a powerful idea.
Yep.
It's about creating a culture where everyone's tuned in to their surroundings, looking for those little hints that others might miss.
Exactly. It's about empowering every Marine to think like an intelligence pro, to understand how what they do contributes to winning the intelligence war.
So we've covered a lot. The nature of intelligence, the intelligence cycle, how intelligence can drive tempo. What are some key takeaways you'd like listeners to think about as we move into the next part of our deep dive?
The biggest takeaway, I think, is that intelligence isn't just for dedicated intelligence units. It's a core function, something every Marine needs to get and really embrace.
Yeah.
It's about building that culture of intelligence. Everyone contributes, everyone analyzes, everyone understands how powerful that actionable knowledge is on the battlefield.
And we've only scratched the surface of MCDP2. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some specific techniques and the challenges of putting these principles into action. Stay tuned.
Picking up where we left off, MCDP 2 really pushes for a balanced approach to intelligence. It's not just about collecting information, it's about using a bunch of sources, making sure each step in the intelligence cycle works, and ensuring that the intelligence supports commanders at every level.
Sounds like a delicate dance, making sure all those parts work together. What are some of the challenges, that Marines run into trying to keep that balance?
One big one's information overload. Like we talked about, this information revolution, it's given us tons of data, but it's easy to get lost in it all and lose focus on what actually matters.
So how do we stop that? How do we make sure we're using our intelligence resources on things that will actually make a difference out there in the battle space.
MCDP2, it stresses how important prioritization is. Commanders, they've got to clearly define what intelligence they need. Got to make sure that collection and analysis, they're lined up with those priorities. It's about focusing our energy on those knowledge gaps, the ones that, if we fill them, will have the biggest impact on the mission succeeding.
So it's not about trying to know everything, right? It's about focusing on what really matters.
You got it. MCDP2 also highlights decentralization. By pushing those intelligence resources down to lower levels, we're giving those commanders the power to make faster decisions, smarter decisions, based on the intelligence they're getting in real time.
So it's about giving those guys closest to the action, the information they need, to grab those opportunities, the ones that don't last long, and exploit those weaknesses the enemy has.
Exactly. We've also got to recognize that intelligence needs, they change depending on who's in command. A squad leader, they need different intel than a battalion commander, and the intelligence process has to be flexible enough to meet all those different needs.
Earlier, we were talking about how intelligence can drive tempo MCDP2. It's into some specific techniques for doing that. I'm curious, what are some ways we can use intelligence to get that edge over the enemy?
One way is to get information out there fast, even if it means sharing it before it's been fully processed and analyzed. Sometimes, in a situation that's moving fast, fluid, getting timely info out to the people who need it is more important than waiting for perfect intelligence.
But isn't there a risk there? Sharing info that's not completely vetted, what if it's wrong or misleading?
There's always a risk, but the trick is to balance that need for speed with the possibility of making a mistake. And CDP2, it says commanders need to understand the limits of any information they get and use their judgment to make the best call.
So weighing the good that can come from timely info against the risk of acting on something that might not be complete or totally verified.
Exactly. It's a judgment call. And a lot of times, the situation will tell you what to do. NCDP2 also points out how important accessibility is. Intelligence, it needs to be easy to get to for the people who need it. This means minimizing all those security restrictions that aren't really necessary and using open sources whenever we can.
It's about making sure that intelligence isn't locked away somewhere, right?
Right.
It's got to be flowing to those Marines who need it to make decisions to accomplish their missions.
Exactly. And the format that intelligence comes in, that's important too. Visuals like maps, charts, graphs, they're often easier to understand than a big, long report. It's about presenting intelligence in a way that's intuitive, that people can use.
It's all about giving commanders what they need in a way they can understand quickly so they can make those split-second decisions.
I got it. MCDP2 also talks about managing information effectively. We need to use all those communication channels we have to make sure intelligence gets where it needs to go, fast. Tactical data links, satellite communications, even basic radio networks. They all play a part in getting information to the right people at the right time.
Like a circulatory system for intelligence, making sure it's always flowing to every corner of the battle space.
Perfect analogy. But even with all the tech we have now, MCDP2 reminds us that the human element, it's still critical to the intelligence process.
So what are some of those human factors that can affect intelligence operations?
One is training and education. MCDP2 really stresses having a balanced approach to intelligence training. We need to build specialized skills, sure, but we also need to cultivate a broader understanding of how everything works.
So we need both specialists and generalists, Marines, who are experts in their specific intelligence areas, but also understand how intelligence fits into the bigger picture of planning and execution.
You got it. Intelligence pros, they need to speak the language of operations. They need to understand what the commander wants to do and tailor their analysis to what the mission needs.
Meaning they've got to be able to explain their findings to people who aren't in intelligence?
Absolutely. They've got to present complex stuff in a way that's clear, concise, and everyone can understand. And the other way around, too. Those who aren't in intelligence, they need to be able to tell the intel guys what they need, what they've observed.
It's a two-way street, communication between the intelligence pros and the forces they're supporting.
Exactly. And exercises, training scenarios, they're crucial. They have to incorporate real intelligence challenges. That way, we get the chance to practice, learn from our mistakes, and build confidence in our intelligence capabilities. It's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get.
It's all about creating a culture of continuous learning, always getting better Marines at all levels, constantly sharpening their intelligence skills, and adapting to all those challenges out there on the battle space, which are always changing.
Exactly. And MCDP2 also emphasizes training in foreign areas and languages. The more we understand our potential adversaries, their cultures, what makes them tick, the better we'll be able to figure out what they're going to do. and come up with effective ways to counter them.
It's about bridging the cultural divide, seeing the world from their point of view, understanding their perspective.
You got it. That kind of insight, it's incredibly valuable for good intelligence work.
MCDP2 also acknowledges that intelligence isn't always about fancy gadgets and super complicated analysis. Sometimes it's about basic observation, human intuition, that ability to see those little clues that other people miss.
Absolutely. MCDP2 makes it clear every Marine is a sensor. They're a potential source of valuable information. Whether you're on patrol, talking to the local population, or just observing what's around you, you can contribute to intelligence.
So it's about being aware, being curious, and being ready to share what you see and hear with those who can analyze that information and use it.
Exactly. It's about building that culture of awareness, of vigilance. Every Marine knows they play a part in the intelligence process.
MCDP2 also talks about the limits of intelligence, reminding us that we're always dealing with incomplete info, the enemy trying to trick us, and that fog of war. How do we balance that need for certainty with the fact that intelligence will never be perfect?
It's about developing a healthy skepticism. Knowing that intelligence is a tool to be used carefully, not some magic crystal ball that shows you the future perfectly. Commanders need to understand the limits of intelligence and be ready to make decisions even when they don't have all the information.
So being confident in our intelligence capabilities,
Yeah.
but also being humble, knowing that we'll never have a complete picture of the battlefield.
You got it. And it's about having a culture where mistakes are seen as chances to learn and improve. We've got to be able to look at our intelligence wins and losses so we can adapt and get better.
MCDP2 brings up a real-world example from Operation Restore Hope in Somalia, showing how even in a humanitarian operation, having a proactive and focused intelligence effort is crucial.
That's a great example. Even though the main mission in Somalia was humanitarian aid, the Marines were still in a tough, complex environment. The commander's guidance and their close relationship with the intelligence officer were key to shaping the intelligence effort and making sure it directly supported what they were trying to do.
The commander in that case, they really focused the collection and production efforts, made sure intelligence was aligned with the mission's priorities, which were constantly evolving.
Exactly. That close teamwork between intelligence and operations. It resulted in targeted actions, disrupted hostile elements, made things safer for the relief efforts. It really shows how effective intelligence directly contributes to the mission succeeding, no matter what kind of operation it is.
MCDP2 doesn't sugarcoat things. It talks about the challenges of intelligence work. It tells us it's not some straight-line, predictable process. It's constantly changing, requires adaptability, critical thinking, and being willing to question what we think we know.
That's key. MCDP2 gives us the framework, but it's on each Marine to apply those principles, sharpen their skills, and contribute to that mission of getting good intelligence. Intelligence that's timely, relevant, and can be acted on.
It's about creating that culture of intelligence where every Marine is a sensor, a thinker, someone who contributes to understanding the enemy, the environment, and the battle space, which is always changing.
That's a great way to sum it up. MCDP2 gives us a roadmap, but each Marine has to navigate that road and contribute to that vital mission of making sure our intelligence is effective.
We've really gone in depth with MCDP2, covered the intelligence cycle, why decentralization matters, getting information out quickly. As we wrap up, what's the main message, the big takeaway, that Marines, especially those in leadership roles, should get from this doctrine?
That intelligence, it's not some specialized thing. It's a fundamental part of how we fight, and it all depends on every Marine being involved. MCDP2, it makes it clear, intelligence, it's a command responsibility. It starts with the commander, they lay out what intelligence they need, but everyone's got to contribute to the effort.
So it's about building that culture of intelligence, right, from the top down, where every Marine, they know their role as a sensor, and they contribute to building that complete understanding of the battlefield.
Exactly. It's about having that mindset where Marines, they're always watching, analyzing, sharing information. They understand that even small details can be important pieces of the puzzle.
MCDP2 gives us the framework, but it's up to each Marine to use those principles to get better at their skills and contribute to that mission. Getting good intelligence that's timely, that's relevant, that can be acted on.
You said it. It's about giving every Marine the power to be an intelligence asset, no matter their rank, no matter their MOS.
So as we close out our deep dive into MCDP2, I want to leave everyone with something to think about. Think about your role, what you're responsible for, where you stand in the Marine Corps. How can you, no matter where you are in the ranks, be more involved in the intelligence process? How can you contribute to building that culture of intelligence that MCDP2 talks about? Remember, in the fog of war, knowledge is power, And that power grows stronger when every Marine embraces their role as a sensor, as someone who contributes to the intelligence effort. That wraps up our deep dive on MCDP2. Thanks for listening.